The remains of the vehicle in which the Iranian general and the Iraqi militia leader were riding when the American missiles struck. Soleimani had just landed at Baghdad's airport. Al-Muhandis was on hand to welcome him. Both were killed instantly, along with at least 5 others. The deaths are a major setback for Iran, which loses its most powerful and most popular military commander and an important Iraqi ally. The reaction from Tehran came quickly. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei ordered 3 days of mourning and issued a statement promising a, quote, strong revenge against the criminal killers of General Soleimani. At Friday prayers, worshippers chanted anti-American slogans and vowed revenge.
How stupid can they be to do such a thing? Because in the Middle East, I think Iran is the factor of stability, and Qasim Soleimani was an influential factor in that stability.
The entire nation of Iran, all the Islamic countries, we are all General Soleimani, and we will never let the U.S. do anything.
This action, which U.S. officials have apparently taken responsibility for, you can be sure it was an amateur act. Iran will wake up and produce more Soleimanis, I assure you.
In Iraq, some celebrated Soleimani's death. Many Iraqis disapprove of Iran's strong influence on the country's politics. But Iraq also has a large Shiite population that sees Iran as a friend. Above all, Iraqis fear being dragged into a U.S.-Iranian conflict.
America and Iran should solve their problems outside Iraq. We don't want them to solve them inside Iraq because that doesn't serve our interests. The people who've gathered here aren't celebrating the killing of Soleimani or anyone else because it doesn't serve us at the end of the day.
The conflict was already ratcheting up before this latest airstrike. On Thursday, 750 American soldiers arrived in Kuwait. Now Washington has directed U.S. citizens in Iraq to get out of the country immediately.
And for more on this story, I'm joined in the studio by Guido Steinberg from the German Institute for International Security Affairs and US political analyst Rachel Rizzo. Guido, can you give us a sense of just how much potential this airstrike has to unleash turmoil in an already extremely volatile region?
Well, you can't overstate the importance of General Soleimani for Iranian expansion in recent years. He has been the general of his generation in the Iranian military. So the Iranians, from their point of view, will have to react. And the problem is that they have already escalated the conflict with the United States. Just think of the Iranian attacks on the Saudi oil installations in September. The next logical step, I think, would be first, to kill Americans. I think that is what's going to happen, not imminently, but perhaps after some months. And the Iranians will try very hard to evict the United States forces from Iraq.
Rachel, what do we know about how this US decision was made? Would President Trump have given the go-ahead fully aware of the possible consequences?
So this attack, this killing was directed by President Trump himself. The Department of Defense tweeted that this was a defensive, decisive action directed by the president. The question is, what comes next? And has the U.S. national security apparatus been working behind the scenes? And are they prepared to have a response from the United States, depending on how Iran decides to respond?
OK, well, we'll talk more about the implications of his death in a moment. But first, let's take a closer look at this significance.
As commander of the elite Quds force of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, Qasim Soleimani was Iran's top general. He was also its most recognizable and popular military commander. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei once called him a living martyr of the revolution. Soleimani joined Iran's Revolutionary Guard after the Iranian Revolution in 1979. He saw action in the 8-year Iran-Iraq War. In 1998, he became commander of the Quds Force that conducts Iran's clandestine and foreign military operations. The U.S. considered him a terrorist and blamed his Quds Force for the deaths of hundreds of American soldiers. Soleimani was especially active in Iranian operations against rebel groups in Syria, against the so-called Islamic State, and supporting Shiite militias in Iraq. Over the years, Soleimani survived a number of scrapes with death, including an airplane crash in 2006 and a bombing in Damascus in 2012. He was 62 years old when an American missile killed him in Baghdad.
Guido, what was this top Iranian general doing in Iraq?
He's an Iraqi politician. The Quds Force is responsible for Iranian foreign policy in the Eastern Arab world, especially Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. And he has been called the most influential person in Iraq by Iraqi politicians in recent years. In fact, in order to become prime minister in Iraq, you needed the consent of Qasim Soleimani already in 2006, in 2010, 2014, and 2018 again. So it was quite a routine event. And he was visiting his friend, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the head of the Hezbollah brigades. These are the closest ally of the Iranian Quds Force, the guy who has been killed with him, and the militia responsible for the attacks on Americans in recent weeks, and the militia mainly responsible for the attack on the American embassy just 3 or 4 days ago.
Rachel, let's have a look at the US now. What's the reaction been in the US to Soleimani's killing, politically, but also from the public?
Unsurprisingly, the reaction has been pretty divided amongst political lines. So this killing was carried out without the knowledge of top congressional senators like Chuck Schumer and Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. And you've gotten tweets from some Republicans like Ben Sasse, Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, saying that this attack was coming. The Iranians have been punching the U.S. in the nose for long enough, and they should have expected it, and they deserved it. Democrats, on the other hand, have had a very different reaction, saying that, yes, Soleimani had blood on his hands, but this is an escalation for which the U.S. might not be prepared. And so when Congress comes back from its recess next week, we can expect them to kind of start looking at checking the president's war powers. But as you saw from Trump's tweet, just the American flag, he's going to use this to try to drum up support from his base.
Does this attack figure in any kind of plan that or strategy that President Trump has for the Middle East?
So the question is, does Trump have a strategy in the Middle East? And if so, what is it? Obviously, countering Iranian influence as well as supporting U.S. allies, Saudi Arabia and Israel is a mainstay of that. But this killing, I think, puts the U.S. administration as well as diplomats and forces abroad in an impossible spot, because now the administration has to strategize and think 5 or 6 steps ahead. And given that the president himself is sort of a rogue actor and likes to, act very impulsively, this is going to be pretty difficult, a difficult one for the U.S. to navigate.
Guido, can we get your take on that? Can the international community discern any coherent Middle East strategy from Washington right now?
There is nothing like an international community, and especially not in this regard. We have seen an escalation between the Iranians and the United States in recent months. And the problem about this escalation is that the United States, I think, doesn't have a strategy. Maximum pressure is not a strategy. It's not clear what they want. And I would have expected a military response by the latest, after the attack on the Saudi oil installations. It has been U.S. policy to protect the Gulf states from any kind of attack since President Carter, the Carter Doctrine in 1980. And President Trump didn't follow up on his threats, and I think that was the mistake that prompted the Iranians to escalate. They thought they could get away with anything. Such a kind of attack and targeted assassination of a regular military commander should only happen if you are ready for military conflict. And the Trump administration is obviously not. Not yet, at least not before the elections.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Guido Steinberg and Rachel Rizzo, thanks so much for your analysis.
Thanks.